Okay, we read. So last time now we started to read about growth, and we read that growth has some rising costs and diminishing return. What is the idea? Now we have economic growth, and is it good or bad for humans' economic growth? Yeah, as anything, it has some pros and cons, some benefits and costs. And so, particularly in the beginning, economic growth has a lot of pros and benefits, but then we will have some costs from economic growth and diminishing returns. What is the meaning of diminishing returns? It's the return of economic growth on well-being. So it means that, as now you know from microeconomics or whatever, that yes, we have some gains, but those gains are becoming smaller and smaller. So the derivative is less than zero. Now we have the second derivative. The derivative is positive of the gains, the first derivative, because the higher GDP, the higher the benefits, but those benefits, the increases in benefit is decreasing. So the second derivative is negative. But also what is the key message of this sentence is that we have smooth changes. Okay, it is, in many cases, we don't have sudden losses in general. Have you ever thought about change? How things change? How can things change? In two very different ways, no? Yeah, yes, please. And don't forget to say your name.
I'm Gavin, studying business administration in Berlin. I think in general things can become better or worse.
Yeah.
Or stay the same.
Yeah. But how? How do things change? No, we have two basic ways of things changing. No? One is sudden, abrupt. No? If I have a bottle of glass on my desk, and if I push it, then it falls down and breaks. And what we have a big cause, like a big push, and then a sudden loss. Okay, and then, but in other cases, we have very, very small changes. Imagine again the bottle. Very small, very small, very small, and we don't notice them. And then suddenly the bottle falls down. This is catastrophe theory. It was developed in the 70s. It's very important, because usually we associated big changes to big causes. And it's about the same of a person dying of a car accident or a person dying of cancer. No, it's in one case this is very long process, in some or another illness, sickness. In other cases, we have a big push, a big change, and we are used now to. If we see the cause, it is easier to see the change. But in many cases, things change, and we don't realize it. Okay, is it clear to you? It's not. And suddenly something happened, and you don't know why. It's because it's the causes. It's we have a lot of small causes accumulating day after day and day after day and day after day, and then we can see the change. Okay, and I think the meaning of this sentence is that it is difficult to see the changes. No, it is difficult to see the consequences of growth. It is easy to see the benefits. More money, more energy, more income, more well-being, and so on. But at the same time, it is difficult to see the costs. It is difficult to see the losses. No, because if we saw an accident, then it's clear to everybody. And so the manifestation of the limits is very difficult to be perceived. And of course, this is called a technological fix. Technology can, yeah, but, sorry, please.
Julius
From?
Kiel.
From Kiel.
Germany?
Yeah. Germany where?
Kiel.
Kiel.
So north of
Yeah, almost Denmark.
I'm just thinking about that. Some people can see the changes. I mean, for example, your what you said with the bottle, that we can push it further and suddenly it falls down. I mean, I couldn't see that the bottle will fall down, but for example, a mathematician, he could know the effects that it has to tap on the bottle, and he will say, yeah, right now nothing happens, but like in 10 minutes it will fall down.
Yeah.
So for some people it's not clear, but for others it's like really clear what the effects are and what will happen in the future.
Yeah, the issue is about voters. Now, is it clear to voters or not? It is clear to the majority of people or not? Like for COVID, it was clear that it was an exponential process. And it was clear that we had to pay attention not to the amount of cases, rather on the speed of contagious. So from a no energy anymore. And so it is now very, in a sense, for instance, avalanches in the mountains. Now, you know, they don't depend on the temperature, but they depend on variations in temperature. And it's always so difficult to understand lay persons, not to understand these issues of variations. Okay? Yes, please.
Jan from Germany. In my opinion, it is kind of, I would say, kind of a gamble if technology might ever be able to really fix all of the resource scarcities. There might be somewhere it could fix them at least more or less, almost 100%, but that's something that we cannot control as of now, that we cannot assume for the next few years. We cannot live like, okay, I'm just gonna assume someday they're gonna find some way to fix it. That's we need to prepare for the worst case scenario just in case. But what is definitely sure, in my opinion, and we can already see that if we take a look around us, that it definitely helps in terms of resource use. For example, if you take a look at like I don't know, LED lamps or something, they've gotten way more energy efficient, like for example the original lamps from a few decades ago. So you can definitely tell that the resources, obviously, yeah, we are using more resources in certain areas, but still we use them, we get more of it, we use them in a better way, I would say.
Yeah. So this is what Jan said is in a sense we will discuss this in the next classes. Now, technology is on the supply side, but then the amount of resources that we use depends on demand. Okay? So the interaction between demand and supply will determine resource use and resource scarcity. Now, actually, we will mention the rebound effects. How many of you have heard about rebound effects or Gibbons paradox? Is that you become more efficient and you consume more resources, which is rather a paradox, but it occurs. And this is one side of the problem. My question was whether technology works better with resource scarcity or pollution. Actually, why technology might work better with resources rather than pollution. Well, what will happen if a resource is very scarce? Yes, please.
I'm Sophia.
Sophia.
Yeah.
From
Italy.
Italy.
Well, I think it's in our interest to be able to use and find enough resources.
Yeah.
Geodynamic pollution is not a problem of today, whether it's more seen as a problem of tomorrow. And
Yeah.
that's immigration, so it's something we can live with
Yeah.
right now. So I think that might be why.
Yeah, this is one important reason is perception. The perception of the importance, is it? Of the importance of resource basis rather than pollution. And then there is also another much more economical reason. What will happen if the resource become a resource becomes very scarce? Yeah, but yeah, please. Yeah.
It becomes expensive, more
It
expensive.
becomes more expensive.
But pollution isn't.
Yeah, exactly. No? Yeah. So usually resources are sold on the markets. So if a resource becomes scarce, then its price will increase. And if the price increases, then the economic agents will react to that. I mentioned a few lessons ago the case of lithium. Now, lithium, everyone was so worried about lithium, and the price of lithium started to rise, and then more resources have been devoted to search and discovery lithium mines okay? And actually, both China and US found a huge mine of lithium, okay? And also it will encourage the substitution of lithium with other stuff. No? And for instance, we have now sodium batteries. Sodium batteries are rather big, are for industrial uses, but still they have a huge capacity of accumulating energy. And I think it is at least 2 years that you can buy on the market sodium batteries. And they are, of course, much less dense than lithium. You cannot put a sodium battery on a car, but you can put it to accumulate renewable energy in a plant, in a farm. No? And so, also in the 70s, we had 2 big oil shocks. And so the price of a barrel really became so high as compared to a few days before. And the reaction from the industry was to hugely improve the efficiency of production processes. So they eliminated so many inefficiencies in energy use that they were able to survive the oil shocks. And actually, those shocks promoted huge changes, irreversible changes in the production chain. Now, what if gasoline doubles? What will happen? Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah, from Germany. I guess there are the alternatives will the alternatives will be better researched, and for example, things like, I don't know, electric cars, maybe also hydrogen cars or anything might be developed way faster than they are right now, and thus everything just develops way faster.
Yeah, this is in the medium long term, but in the short term. So do you remember demand elasticity? Now the demand elasticity for gasoline or any fuel is rather low, because even if the price increases, you commute, maybe you go to your job by commuting maybe 50 kilometers a day, and then you don't know how to get there, and you will keep using the car for a while. But then you will do something, no? And you will start maybe to do carpooling and go to your job with some colleagues. Or you can start using public transportation. And so even in the short term, in the beginning the demand the elasticity of demand is very low, but then you will do something. Okay, and then again, it maybe in the end you will buy an electric car and so on. So it will push technology to change, and so it will induce reaction. But pollution, it is not sold on the market usually. No, there are some attempts like the carbon market, but there are very few cases. No, we don't have PM, particulate matters, pollution, so it is not sold on the market. And so actually everything is left to regulation. And regulation is linked to voters. And voters need to perceive it as a problem of the present and not a problem of the future. Okay? So, let's start reading. Yes, please.
Economic growth and development obviously involve changes in the physical ecosystem. Every ecosystem everywhere cannot be preserved.
A force may be deflected in one part of a watershed and extended elsewhere, which is not a bad thing if the exploitation has been planned and the effects on soil erosion, waste, water jams, and the genetic losses have been taken into account.
Okay, so this sentence I think is, to me, very important. No, we need to be aware. Is it? Now, what is the takeaway point of this sentence? We need to be aware of consequences. Yeah, please.
I think it just means that the ecosystems has to be seen as rather like one big thing, and
Also,
each one
Yeah.
on their own.
yeah, exact. Also this, no, is that, the ecosystem as a whole, no? And maybe it's nothing bad if we destroy part of that, but we need to preserve it as a whole, and in any case, have been taken into account. Now, we need to be aware. We need to do conscious decisions. Next one.
Economic growth and
No,
development.
no, in general?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In general, renewable resources like forests and fish stocks need to be completely provided the rate of use is within the limits of regeneration and natural growth.
But most renewable resources are part of a complex and interlinked ecosystem. The maximum sustainable yield must be defined after taking into account system-wide effects of exploitation.
Okay, this is what you were telling just before. No? Now, take, for instance, one species of fish. And now suppose that we use it we extract it at a sustainable rate. Now that is the production. So we extract in a year an amount of fishes that is equal to the newborns. But we have to consider that those fishes maybe are eaten by other fishes, which are not exploited for commercial uses. Okay? And so the one resource is within a network. So we cannot do our calculations only considering that single resource. No? We are part of a complex and interlinked ecosystem. So it is so difficult to calculate the maximum sustainable yield, because we need to take into account all the species that are connected to that species that we fish. So, now, should we be concerned for renewable or non-renewable? What is a renewable source? Yeah.
Something like forests or animal stock that can regenerate over time.
Okay, they can regenerate on the time. So living beings, no? And trees, no? And forest. And so the sustainable rate, in a sense that it lasts over time, is that I extract the increase in the resource. Now I cut an amount of wood, which is the increase in the biomass of the forest. And if I do that, I'm sure that the forest will remain the same. Maybe I can cut a bit more because I want a smaller forest, but that, okay? And what are non-renewable sources?
The sources that cannot be renewable,
Yeah?
like gold or another things that under the ground. And
Yeah.
the thing about the renewable, we also have two types of renewable, like short-term renewable and the long-term renewable.
Yeah.
Also the forest, it's a long-term renewable, because if we cut hundreds of trees, we'll have to wait for 50 or a century to make a new
Yeah.
forest.
Yeah, so the issue mainly is an issue of scale. And we have non-renewable, which are non-renewable in human times, like oil, natural gas. And while renewables, there are, again, some resources that are rather quick, some which are rather long, and in general, much longer than the ability of human beings to replace artificial capital, not to replace plants. No? If you want to build a plant, a manufacturing farm, how long does it take to build a brand new plant, factory? Months? 1 year, maybe? No, which is very, very, very quick. So usually we are used to be very worried about oil, gas, about non-renewable. But also renewable are very much a matter of concern. No, we need to be concerned about renewables, because it is very easy to over-extract them and make them to disappear. Okay, next one, please.
As for non-renewable resources like fossil fuels and minerals, their use decreases is probably able for future generations.
So we are talking about stock. Stock is the amount of stuff that we have. This is also very important. What is a stock and what is a flow? What is a stock of water and what is a flow of water? Yeah, come on. Someone who never talks. You. What is a stock and what is a flow? Your name?
Juliette,
Juliette.
France.
Yeah. A stock
Yes.
and a flow. Think about water and mountains.
I think the stock doesn't mean that.
Yeah, and just as an example, the stock is that. The mountain is that.
It's the ice or
Ice, for instance, or even if it is melted, is that
I don't know, rocks.
a big place where you have water? How do you call it?
I don't know in English.
Yeah, that's one.
Um,
I think lake.
yes.
A lake, no?
Exactly.
And the river is, it flows water, no?
Yes.
So a flow is the amount of water that goes from one point to another point, maybe in 1 month, in 1 hour, in 1 day, and this is a flow. And the stock is the amount of water that I have maybe in a tank. No, the stock of gasoline is in your car is how much gasoline is in a moment, in an exact moment, in your tank. And while a flow is the amount of gasoline that you consume to run 1 hour or 2 kilometers or whatever. No? And non-renewable resources are available in a form of stock. Okay, and we extract from the stock the flows. Next one.
But this does not mean that such resources should not be used. In general, the rate of
Depletion, yeah? Should.
should take into account the criticality of that resource, the availability of technologies for minimizing depletion, and the likelihood of substitutes being available.
Okay, so again, substitutes is very important. No? Okay, I have some oil, I have some natural gas. Okay, and what if I don't have it anymore? What if I exploit all the natural gas? Yeah, of course, we have very bad effects on climate change. But concerning the problem of resource use, I will not have problems if I find substitutes. And so I can face this problem, not like lithium. I don't have lithium. And I can face this problem by minimizing depletion and by finding substitutes.
As land should not be degraded beyond reasonable recovery. With minerals and fossil fuels, the rate of depletion and the emphasis on recycling and economy of use should be calibrated to ensure that the resource does not run out before acceptable substitutes are available. Sustainable development requires that the rate of depletion of non-renewable resources should foreclose as few future options as possible.
Okay, so the issue of substitution. No? So,
Development tends to simplify ecosystems and to reduce the diversity of species. And species, once extinct, are not renewable.
okay, this is a major issue. Yeah? This is why, in a sense, it's, we should be concerned with renewables. While we can substitute oil, we can substitute platinum or any other metal. We cannot substitute lost species.
plant and animal species can greatly limit the options of future generations. So sustainable development requires the conservation of plants and animal species.
Okay. Option, no? Options of future generation. This is very important, and we will see. Yeah, we have time. A case at the High Court of Germany that occurred a few years ago. So one issue is the options of future generation. Options. And this will pose limitations on future generations somehow to satisfy their needs. Next one.
So whole-free goods like air and water are also resources. The raw materials and energy of production processes are only partly converted to useful products. The rest comes out as wastes.
Sustainable development requires that the adverse impacts of the quality of air, water, and other natural elements are minimized so as to sustain the ecosystem's overall integrity.
Okay, now and we have again ecosystems integrity. And again, this is linked to the idea that nature supports life. It's not that we eat fishes or we extract something from nature, no, because the traditional view from resource economists is that nature provides goods and services. But the main service of nature is supporting life in a general way. And this is written here, ecosystems overall integrity. But again, and I tell it again and again and again and again, the whole perspective of the Brundtland report is that we need ecosystems integrity for the health of human beings. Now, the perspective is anthropocentric. The Commission didn't care very much about other living beings. We need to care about the ecosystem's overall integrity because it is our self-interest. Is it clear that? I mean, this is a perspective of this Commission. Of course, you might disagree, but their message is that we need to do it for our self-interest. It's not for caring about plants or animals or bacteria. I wrote here Georgescu region. We will mention and have a look at one paper by Georgescu. Georgescu was a Romanian economist, and then he moved to the States, and he spent a big part of his life in the States. And he insisted so much on the material nature of the economic process. Usually in economics, we are not used to insist so much on the fact that economic process has a very important material basis. Okay? So, think about the production. What do we do when we produce a good? How do we produce goods? Come on, another one who doesn't.
We use resources.
We use resources. So first stage, we take resources maybe from a mine.
Yes.
And then
Then we use them.
well,
We
before
elaborate them.
we process it,
Process them, yeah.
and then well, after that, suppose gold, no? We extract the gold, and maybe we move 10 tons of matter,
Yes.
and we extract how much gold?
Less gold. Less gold.
Yeah, much. Maybe 1 kilo of gold after processing 10 tons of materials. And where does those materials go?
It's wasted.
It's a waste. Then we take this gold and then we
Create something.
create something using energy and producing other waste. And in the end, gold is not, because we don't throw away gold after use. But think about fast fashion. Yeah? And Georgescu-Regian insisted very much that from a physical viewpoint, the economic process is destroying high quality energy and matter. From a physical viewpoint, the economic process is generating waste. And why do we generate waste? And also, Georgescu insisted very much, is because of enjoying life. Because this process of destroying high quality energy and matter helps us to live better. But still, we cannot forget that any production process implies some deterioration of the quality of matter and energy. Take a piece of coal. And then when you burn it, the piece of coal contains a lot of energy that can be used, a lot of free energy. And then when you burn it, what will it happen? It is burned. And so we have used the free energy within this piece of coal. The total energy is the same because of first law of conservation of mass and energy, but then you can't use it anymore. You cannot use twice the same piece of coal. No, it is gone forever. And so we need always to be aware that from a physical viewpoint, the economic process is generating waste. Not producing waste, I would say. Sometimes you use the word waste production. It's a bit funny, not to say waste production. It's better waste generation, because we don't on purpose produce waste. It's a side effect of production. So, next one. Yeah.
In essence, sustainable development is a process of change in which the exploitation of resources, the direction of investments, the orientation of technological development, and institutional change are all in harmony and enhance both current and future potential to meet human needs and aspirations.
So again, all that, as I said before, has a precise purpose, to enhance human well-being, and particularly to meet the needs of the poor, needs and aspirations of all.
Equity and the common interest, sustainable development has been defined here in general terms. How are individuals in the real world to be perceived of many interests in the common interest?
Okay, so this is a crucial question. How can we become convinced that taking care of our environment is in our interest? Now here we have two different problems. One is the one is more rational, is the one of free riding. How many of you know about free riding? Please raise your hand. Free riding and public goods. I don't believe you. Oh, come on. Raise your hands. Free riding and public goods. The problem of financing public goods and free riding. Oh, all the people from MBE should know free riding, otherwise I will take your name and I will ask D'Alessandro to remove your mark. Come on, free riding.
No, non l'ho ancora fatto l'esame.
Non ancora fatto.
Con la multiplier.
Okay, so but it's very simple. Now, if we have a common resource, or I can exploit it, in a sense, without, this, for instance, this light is a public good, because if you use this light for writing your notes, she can use the same amount of lights. It doesn't decrease because you use it. And suppose that we have to pay for that light, and then we have to collect money, and then maybe he can say, no, I don't really need the light. I also like writing as a blind in the night and so on. And she might say the same, and she might say the same. And only a few of you will pay for the light. And then the amount of light provided will be much lower than what is desired. So from a rational viewpoint, now suppose things about fisheries. Okay, then I am a fisherman. I go to the sea, I extract as much as possible, hoping that the others will not extract. And so this is, in a sense, it is a collective interest to extract a sustainable yields, but from the viewpoint of individual, it is the interest is to maximize his extraction. It's like in the prisoner's dilemma. Have you heard about prisoner's dilemma in game theory? Okay. But then we have another issue, which is the issue of perception. Now, it's the perception that we to act in to have a better environment will help us. No? And this is more irrational. It's more about perception. And this is why, next one.
The answer lies partly in education, institutional development, and law enforcement.
Okay, education. Now we need, in order to be aware, now we need to have a strong education. Or live in the countryside and be a farmer, working without fossil fuel, which is also the case. Now, because if you live in nature and if you don't have fossil fuels and life is hard, you will be much more in contact and be much more aware of how real life is and how important it is to have high quality water in your village and so on. Institutional development. So institutions are important to care after common goods, and laws, law enforcement.
But many problems of resource depletion and environmental stress arise from disparities in economic and political power.
Okay, this is also something which is very often neglected, both in economics and in general.
An industry may get away with unacceptable levels of air and water pollution because the people who bear the brunt of it are poor and about to complain effectively.
Okay, this is very much related to something we mentioned. Costs, production costs. Are they objective? Can they be measured? Of course they can be measured, but they depend on the institutional context. Now, an industry that shifts the cost onto the others, of course, has very low cost. A firm which is able to exploit labor or to exploit child labor has much lower cost than a firm that doesn't exploit child labor. Okay, so sometimes now we think as costs as objective measures. The cost of producing this iPad is this, and then I calculate, and then I know the cost of producing the iPad. But this is not true. This is not an objective truth, because the cost depend on power relations. If I am able to discard my waste in an easy and cheap way, then my products will cost very low. And so I can charge a low price. And I can be very competitive. And this will displace all the firms that do not exploit labor, that do not exploit the environment, the natural environment. So the idea of complaining and shifting the costs onto the society as a whole, I think, which is not bad or not good. It is a matter of fact. No, and again, it's always very difficult to understand what really firms do. No, because maybe a firm can declare that it is very sustainable, that it doesn't exploit labor, and so on. But then who knows? That they buy from organic farmers and so on. So we have a huge problem of information. But it is sure that the issue of power is so much important. And this, of course, depends on disparities in economic and political power. Because if you don't have the power to complain, then you are subject to get the external cost of production. And this is why it is so difficult, but at the same time, it is so needed a good institutional context. Okay, so, and usually it is normal. I mean, laws are there since to regulate human activities. Is it allowed or forbidden to sell sex services, sexual services? It is allowed to sell a kidney, organs, body organs, or not? And so all that belongs to the institutional settings. What is allowed and what is not allowed. And we have social norms, so cultural norms. No, is there anyone from the UK? For instance, no, and a very strong social norms in the UK is related to the lines, queues. And they, for instance, they did an experiment some times ago, and basically you cannot sell your place in a line. No, and they did this experiment in the city in London. A very well dressed person arrived in a rush and proposed to a person which was very close to catching the bus, "Oh, could you please become the last one in the line, because I have to rush. I'll give you, I think, £20 or something like that." And everyone was horrified. But actually, no, the people who were back in the line, they were not damaged because their number was the same as before. It was just a substitution. So this third one was becoming the last one. And so the number of people that everyone had before them was exactly the same. But this kind of experiment, was so everyone protested so strongly because there was this social norm that the line is sacred. You cannot sell it. A place in the line cannot be sold. I don't know how it is now, and so it is really normal that a society has some rules, has some formal rules, has some informal rules, and those rules has a purpose, even if we don't know sometimes. And the purpose is a well-functioning of the society. There is a ratio, there is a reason why in most society it is forbidden to sell body organs. While if you read Mankiw, a book in economics which is very, very famous, it says, look, it would be a welfare improvement if a poor person could sell one of its 2 kidneys, because you would get a lot of money and still he could survive with only 1 kidney. And at the same time, the person who will get the kidney will improve the quality of his life. And this is a welfare improvement. So in his book, there is an attack against this law that does not allow to sell or body organs, which is clearly this critique. It comes clearly from ignorance of a complete ignorance of any physiology and the reason why we have 2 kidneys. No? One is because it is very easy to get to get a problem with 1 kidney. So one is really a backup, and in many cases it works as a backup. But so okay, next one.
The forest might be destroyed by excessive felling because of the people living there have no alternatives, though, because timber contractors generally have more influence than forest welfare, environment.
Yeah, okay. So, is it clear to everybody how exploitation works? And this is very much related to the issue of environmental justice and conflicts, and also to WTP and WTA, which means willingness to pay and willingness to accept, that we will also discuss during the course. Again, it's a matter of power. No, a population living in a village, they live out of the forest, and so maybe they have no alternatives, or other people from outside, maybe from the global north, come and exploit their land beyond any sustainable level. And so you can find a lot of literature on the environmental justice. And at the same time, willingness to pay and willingness to accept is a standard tool that economists use to assess environmental goods. Now we go and ask people, how much are you willing to pay to save this forest? How much are you willing to accept this environmental damage? And again, this is very much related to the level of wealth and income. And of course, if you ask a homeless, how much are you willing to pay to save this forest, and the homeless would say nothing. And so the distribution of wealth, of power, and so on clearly affect sustainable development. Next one.
Ecological interactions do not respect the boundaries of individual ownership and political jurisdiction, does?
Okay, so is this clear? Now we have administrative units. Now we have states, regions, and so on. But in the natural world, everything is connected.
In the watershed, the ways in which a farmer helps to the slope uses land directly after runoff or runs down the stream.
Next one.
The irrigation practices, pesticides, and fertilizers used on one farm affect the productivity of neighboring ones, especially among smallholder.
Next one.
The efficiency of a factory boiler determines its rates of emission of soot and noxious chemicals and affects all who live and work around it.
Next one.
The hot water discharged by a thermal power plant into a river or a local sea affects the catch of all fish water.
Okay, so what is the takeaway point? If we have to synthesize in a sentence that, what would you suggest? Now, everything is connected, no? This is completely different from what we experience in our, in a sense, mindset. No, because we are used, particularly in tribunals, to think about causes. What causes what? What is the cause for that? Why did I get my cough last week? Everything is about why. No? In our legal system, in business, why? What is the cause? What is the cause? What is the cause? But in nature, in ecosystem, everything is so much different. Can we think about a single cause? It's difficult, no? Because everything is so much interconnected. We have huge material flows from one actor to the other, but we don't see them. What is the problem of industrial agriculture? Is that we don't see the effect. Yeah? And it is so difficult, even a person who maybe a geologist or whatever, it's so difficult to see the effects. I think last year or 2 years ago, I went to a conference about sea erosion. And we have these big problems with coastal erosion here in Pisa. And particularly there is this village, Marina di Pisa, which is on the coast. And we have huge problems in keeping the sea far away from the village. It's very much, it's very important historical, small, it's, I think maybe 5,000 inhabitants. It is inhabited also in winter and so on. And there was a conference on that, on the problem of sand erosion and coastal erosion. And then the guy, who is an international expert, is a professor from Florence, said, no, don't worry. Next year, we will have a lot of sand here. And the reason is that 2 years ago, a huge fire occurred in those mountains close to Pisa, 2 or 3 years ago. And then, if we don't manage the mountains, there will be a huge erosion processes. They will go to the river, and the river will spread the sand to in the coast. So now it's really strange not to think, there was this big fire there, and then this will replenish the beach. It's not so immediate to understand. But at the same time, we don't want floods. We don't want a big event in the mountains. So the more we keep the mountains, the more we cultivate the mountains, the more we care after the mountains, the more we are accelerating coastal erosion. And so, I mean, to me, it was really, really strange, no? And I never thought about that. And so, really, everything is so much connected, no? And fertilizers, or soil erosion, but we are not really not able to see. And this maybe is one of the big problems that we face today. Is our different mindset. In our society, the amount of energy that we have separate us from the environment and allows us to think in terms of linear relationship. Okay, and it's just cause and effect, cause and effect. And in some cases, it's easy to understand what is the cause of a given effect. But in most other cases, we have so many causes and the relationship is so much complicated that we should change our mindset and we should not be so arrogant to try to understand a single cause. Next one. Yeah.
Traditional social systems recognize some aspects of this interdependence and enforce community control over agriculture practices and traditional rights relating to water, forest, and land.
Next one.
This enforcement of the common interest did not necessarily impede growth and expansion, though it may have limited the acceptance and diffusion of technical innovations.
Okay, this woman got a Nobel Prize for her studies on how how managing the commons is indeed possible in many places of the world. Because we usually think that if you don't have private property, then things will not work. But indeed, there are so many places in the world, particularly in the global south, where commons work. And the reason is very simple. Because the environment, their environment, is the resource basis of the population. And so they have to do something if they are exhausting their resource basis, if the water is becoming of poor quality. No? Next one.
Local interdependence has, if anything, increased because of the technology used in modern agriculture and manufacturing. Yet with this surge of technical progress, the growing enclosure of common lands, the erosion of common rights in forests and other resources, and the spread of commerce and production for the market, the responsibilities for decision-making are being taken away from both groups and individuals. This shift is still underway in many developing countries. Okay, is it clear now that we are not responsible anymore for our choices? Now, if I want to buy a long-lasting clothes, it's difficult. Because we live in a world of fast fashion and short-lived clothes. So even if I want, I can't. So is next one? Have you read? Yes. Yeah. So, again.
It is not that there is one set of buildings and another of victims. All would be better off if each person took into account the effect of his or her acts upon others. But each is unwilling to assume that others will behave in this socially desirable fashion, and hence will continue to pursue narrow self-interest.
Okay, as we said, now is this prisoner dilemma or free riding. One reason is behaving in our narrow self-interest.
Communities or governments can compensate for this isolation through laws boasts a strict liability legislation can control harmful side effects.
Most important, effective participation in decision-making processes by local communities can help them articulate and effectively enforce their community.
Okay, then effective participation is really missing today. Effective participatory processes, no, in the decision. Usually, decisions are taken in a top-down way. They are not explained to the population. The population is not involved at all. So,
dependence is not simply a local phenomenon. Rate of growth in production has extended to the international plane with both physical and economic manifestations. There are growing global and regional pollution effects, such as in the more than 200 international river basins and the large number of shared seas.
no, as a river is typically the boundary of states. No, we have so many international river basins, and also we have conflicts about the use of the rivers, about who can produce electricity, and so on. And this again, it was written in the middle of the 80s. Don't forget that.
Then possible common interest affects subjects because areas of political jurisdiction and areas of impact do not coincide.
Okay, this is very crucial. Now we have some administrative boundaries which are different from the ecosystem boundaries. Please.
Energy policies in one jurisdiction cause acid
Precipitation.
in the
Yeah, acid rains. They were a huge problem in the 70s and in the 80s due to the high sulfur content of the oil and carbon that was burned.
The fishing policies of one state affect the fish catch of another. No supranational authority exists to resolve such issues. And the common interest can only be articulated through international cooperation.
Now, you know the issue of fisheries, of Japan fishing everywhere in the world, and overfishing and so on.
In the same way, the ability of government to control its national economy is reduced by growing macroeconomic interaction. For example, foreign trade with commodities makes issues of clearing capacities and resource scarcities and international cooperation.
A very big concern is fiscal competition among states, even in Europe. So a single state is not so free of setting its budget and the fiscal rate just because there are so many other countries competing and trying to attract multinationals with reduced tax rates. And this is really a major problem, no? Because we don't have money, the governments don't have money, because multinationals don't pay so much taxes, and the reason is that they pay taxes in fiscal havens.
If economic power and the benefits of trade were more equally distributed, common interests would be generally recognized.
Yeah.
The dividends from trade are unequally distributed, and patterns of trade in, say,
Sugar?
affect not merely our local sugar producers, but the economies and ecologies of the many developing countries that depend heavily on this trade.
I remember you that in the 80s we had still huge barriers to movement of capitals. It was not a globalized world. And they were already saying that. You know, it's really incredible if we compare to today's. Next one.
The search for common interest will be less difficult if all development and environment problems have solutions that will leave everyone better off.
This is
Seldom?
sorry, I really don't have my glasses. I can't.
Okay, so next one. This is seldom the case.
This is seldom the case, and there are usually winners and losers. Many problems arise from inequalities in access to resources.
So again, you can see how much focus is put in inequality. So the issue is also that we fight over the distribution of the cake, okay, over the distribution of the gains.
An inequitable leadership structure can lead to over-exploitation of resources in the smallest holding, with harmful effect on both environment and development.
Internationally, monopolistic control over resources can drive those who do not share in them to excessive exploitation of marginal resources.
The differing capacities of exploiters to
Commandeer
free goods locally, nationally and internationally is another manifestation of unequal access to resources. Losers in environment or development conflicts include those who suffer more than their fair share of the health, property and ecosystem damage cost of pollution.
As a system approaches ecological limits, inequalities sharpen. Thus, when watershed deteriorates, poor farmers suffer more because they cannot afford the same anti-erosion measures as richer farmers.
Okay, the poor suffer pollution more. Just because the rich can move away, can have many ways to escape, yeah, please.
Whenever inequality deteriorates, the poor and their more remote areas suffer more health damage than the rich, usually live in more pristine neighborhoods.
This is clear, no? It's clear to everybody, no? It's
When mineral resources become granted, late comers to the industrialization process use the benefits of their cost of life. Globally, wealthier nations are better placed financially and technologically to cope with the effects of possible climate change.
again, now you know about the small island states problem. That they are often small islands that will disappear very soon. And of course, the richer you are, the better you can mitigate and face the problems from climate change. No?
As our inability to promote the common interest in sustainable development is often a product of the relative neglect of economic and social justice within and amongst nations.
Okay, so as you can see, a cause is injustice and lack of attention on distributive issues and not only on allocative interest. So we can